This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The new Lebanese government will not see the daylight anytime soon. This became clear after the Lebanese opposition rejected the government coalition that was proposed by Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. Some describe the proposed new government as an attempt to create sectarian strife. Hariri presented the Lebanese president, Michel Suleiman, with the new government, comprised of 30 ministers, saying that they represent all different political parties in a balanced way. He left the president with the responsibility of deciding the fate of the proposed government. Our reporter Elian Chatri reports from Beirut.
Prime Minister Hariri presented the Lebanese President Michel Suleiman with a proposal of a new government comprised of 30 ministers. 15 seats were given to the majority, 10 to the opposition, and 5 to the president. Hariri talked about his new government proposal during an iftar, or fast-breaking ceremony.
I have constitutional rights and I have practiced them. The President of the Republic also has constitutional rights. The opposition also has the right to accept or reject the proposed government.
Hariri's proposal came despite warnings from the opposition that he should not announce a new government before reaching an agreement with them beforehand about the new government coalition. Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah said that the way in which Hariri announced the new government coalition would only complicate the crisis in Lebanon, not solve it. A delegation from the opposition went to the presidential headquarters in Beit Din Palace to notify the president that they absolutely object to the new proposed government.
We have notified the President of our rejection, but we have also expressed our willingness to continue negotiations and dialogue.
According to the Lebanese Constitution, the President, in coordination with the Prime Minister's office, is supposed to announce the new government. The question is, what is the President's position on the new government's composition? Will he sign Hariri's government proposal or not? The initial response of the President, according to those who visited him, is that he is still studying the new government proposal and that he hasn't decided yet, and he will not decide before having consulted with everyone.
The President of the Republic will absolutely not sign this new government proposal, but he will not reject a government proposal that is submitted to him by Prime Minister Rafik al-Hariri in a very clear way. Therefore, the status quo will remain. The ruling majority will maintain their position, and the opposition will continue to reject the new government proposal. Consequently, there will be strong political debates in the next 10 days.
The only difference this time is that the country has entered a very critical period. Optimists believe that Hariri's proposal will form a new basis for political negotiations, but realists reiterate that the proposal will drag the country into a new era of political conflict, or at least it will take the process of establishing a new government back to square one. Elia Chatri, Dubai TV, Beirut.
Two NATO soldiers were killed and 4 others were injured. In addition, 3 civilians were killed and 6 were injured in an explosion outside the military entrance of the NATO air base at Kabul International Airport. The Taliban declared responsibility for the explosion. This comes as the international forces in Afghanistan have become increasingly concerned due to the continued military escalation and the failure to achieve military goals.
The security situation was shaken up once again in Kabul as a booby-trapped vehicle exploded outside the military base at Kabul International Airport, which has been used by NATO forces to get in and out of the airport. The suicide explosion killed members of the ISAF forces as well as Afghan civilians and injured 8 others.
As soon as the explosion took place, we called the ambulances. When I left the site of the explosion, I saw a number of dead and injured civilians and a number of casualties from the international forces, but I did not know their nationalities. The explosion also destroyed 2 military vehicles.
Taliban spokesman Sadiq Kala Mujahed declared the organization's responsibility for the attack and said that it has killed and injured dozens of members of the foreign forces. This attack came only a few days after the military strike that was carried out by NATO against 2 oil tankers in the Kunduz area in northern Afghanistan, which killed dozens of civilians. The attack created controversy between NATO forces and the Afghan government, which demanded an investigation into the incident.
The Taliban always tries to retaliate against every attack that is launched by NATO against its forces. Therefore, I think that there is a link between the attack on the military base at Kabul airport and the airstrike that was carried out by NATO forces against Taliban fighters in the Kunduz area in northern Afghanistan.
The military escalation comes at a time when NATO forces are in a state of panic over the war against the Taliban, especially as the costs of the war continue to increase. Not to mention the fact that the American government is procrastinating on changing the current war strategy despite continued failures. These failures have decreased the popularity of the Afghan war in the U.S. and Britain, not to mention the mounting resentment among the Afghan population, which no longer feels that the government can follow through on its promises to establish stability. This comes as the Taliban continues to improve its ability to carry out armed attacks, despite the security measures taken by NATO. The military operation that was carried out by the Taliban on this road shows once again that the Taliban can attack even fortified targets and cause fatalities. From the road to Kabul airport, Mahmoud Wathiq Al-Alam, Kabul.
Joining us from Kabul, Parliament member Mir Ahmed Judan. Mr. Mir, the Afghan authorities and foreign forces so far have been unable to secure the capital. What is wrong?
Assalamu alaikum.
The problems which we have observed from our experiences with the foreign forces in Afghanistan are the following. The foreign forces lack clear strategies. The Afghan defense forces and the national police are not at the level that enables them to take on defense responsibilities in Afghanistan. Some foreign countries' intelligence agencies in Afghanistan do not cooperate with one another. Moreover, we lack a central command center. Also, the Afghan borders are porous, allowing terrorists to enter through many crossing points, especially in the northern and southern areas. Terrorists can easily infiltrate these areas.
وأيضا الحدود والمناطق الحدودية الأفغانية أيضا مفتوحة أمام.
The terrorists still have special training bases, which makes it hard for us to improve security.
The United States has offered to help the Yemeni government crack down on al-Zaidi Shia fighters. According to Yemeni officials, the offer was made in a letter from the U.S. President Barack Obama to President Abdullah Saleh. Washington says it will use the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank's schemes to help the government. Scores of civilians have been killed and thousands displaced since the government began a crackdown on Shia Houthis in Sada province. The Houthis say they are defending the people against the government's oppression.
The The upcoming deal with the United States on the proposed moratorium on new construction in the territories is expected to last 6 months. According to the Jerusalem Post, an extension will depend on whether the Palestinian Authority and neighboring Arab countries make concrete diplomatic overtures to Israel. In the meantime, settlers are demonstrating their intention to continue building throughout the territories. IBA's Eli Wagalenter has that story.
The Jerusalem Post quotes a senior political official saying that the expected moratorium on new settlement construction will initially be called for 6 months. Afterward, Israel will wait to see if there will be an end to incitement against Israel in the PA media and education system, as well as significant normalization steps from the Arab world. In the meantime, and in the wake of yesterday's announcement of 455 newly approved housing units in the West Bank, settlers are demonstrating their intentions to continue building throughout the territories. Hundreds of people, including 3 government ministers, participated in a symbolic cornerstone-laying ceremony in the contested E1 area of Ma'ale Adumim yesterday. The ceremony was attended by Ministers Daniel Hershkowitz and Uzi Landau, as well as Knesset members and Yesha Council of Settlement activists.
I think it's very heartening to to see the residents of Ma'ale Adumim coming to this spot. I can see it from my living room, and we'll be very happy to see the city expand and grow.
Construction there has drawn much criticism from the international community over claims that it will break Palestinian territorial contiguity in the West Bank and surround Jerusalem with Jewish neighborhoods, making it impossible to develop the city as both a Palestinian and an Israeli capital. Representatives of Peace Now also showed up to the ceremony in a counter-protest.
They grab the territory of the Palestinians, and it's not possible to make peace with all these settlements.
Brief clashes broke out between members of both groups during a speech delivered by Landau, but the groups were quickly dispersed by the police. No arrests have been reported. Meanwhile, in Hebron, Knesset Speaker Reuven Rivlin criticized Netanyahu's plan to freeze settlement construction. Speaking at a ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the Hebron massacre of 1929, in which 67 Jews were slaughtered, Rivlin said, "Anyone who thinks you can build Tel Aviv by drying up Ariel and Ma'ale Adumim, or that will get our territorial rights recognized this way, is destined to repeat past mistakes. Anyone who thinks we will thus escape a Holocaust is embracing false hopes." Also in attendance were Supreme Court Judge Eliakim Rubinstein, Information and Diaspora Affairs Minister Yuli Edelstein, and Likud MK Tzipi Hotoveli. Eli Wagalenter, IBA News.
The Prime Minister's office today confirmed that Benjamin Netanyahu will travel to Cairo next week to meet with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. The announcement of the meeting comes after Netanyahu seemingly disappeared yesterday for a period of 10 hours. According to an official statement released after the Prime Minister's return, Netanyahu had visited a sensitive military installation during the hours in question. And meanwhile, Netanyahu is scheduled to meet with U.S. Middle East envoy George Mitchell to discuss the U.S. brokered package that is expected to lead to a renewal of negotiations with the Palestinians. Mitchell is expected in Israel on Saturday night.
Hi, I'm John Hamilton, breaking in for just a few seconds to ask for your support. You know, television is expensive to produce, and while the team at Mosaic brings you this vital daily news program on a shoestring compared to other networks, the reality is that we still need to raise $200,000 to keep Mosaic strong till the end of the year. Well, each year at this time, we turn to you for that support. You haven't let us down before, so please, let's keep world news from the Middle East alive and strong for another year. You can give online at linktv.org or call us at 1-866-485-8848. And thanks so much for sustaining Mosaic on Link TV.
Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak agreed on building hundreds of residential units at the settlements in the West Bank.
Meanwhile, the settlement committee in the West Bank decided to lay down the cornerstone for new settlements, just one day after Israel said it will suspend the construction of settlements.
Ilyas Karam from Jerusalem has the details.
بتصديق وزير الدفاع إيهود باراك يصبح قرار بنيامين نتنياهو بناء مئات.
With approval from Defense Minister Ehud Barak, Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to build hundreds of new settlement units is now in effect. Barak's decision is part of an agreement that Israel has reached with the United States in order to create the possibility for the temporary suspension of settlement activities. 500 new settlement units will be built, most of which will be located in big settlement blocks, such as Ma'ale Adumim in eastern Jerusalem, Gush Etzion in southern Jerusalem, and Ariel, north of the occupied West Bank. Some of the settlement units will be built in the isolated Jordan Valley and along the Green Line.
أما في القدس فسيستمر البناء على قدم وساق.
In Jerusalem, settlement building is ongoing without any limits. That is not enough for the Israelis, who oppose any suspension of settlement activities, and they did not hide their anger. The leaders of the settlements did not lag behind and vaulted into a symbolic protest by announcing that they will lay down the cornerstone for 3,000 settlement units in an area known as E1 in the eastern part of occupied Jerusalem.
We should consolidate the settlements on all Israeli lands, from the Jordan River to the Red Sea, so that the Palestinians and Arabs will know that Israel is an existing entity and that its power is increasing. They should know that every time the Palestinians waste an opportunity to make peace, they lose.
The settlement project was frozen in compliance with American demands 10 years ago. If this project is carried out, Jerusalem would be completely isolated from the occupied West Bank, and it will be divided, and the northern part would be separated from the southern part.
الطريقة التي أعلنت فيها إسرائيل عن
Israel announced that it will continue building settlements, and it refuses to engage in any talks about Jerusalem. Israel confronts the international community and the United States in particular with one question: will the Obama administration be subjected to Israel's will, or will it respond in a way that can satisfy the Palestinians and Arabs as well?
ومع هذا يجد الفلسطينيون أنفسهم مطالبين بالعودة إلى طاولة.
The Palestinians find themselves being forced to return to the negotiation table and compromise on issues like the continuation of settlement activities, recognizing Israel as a Jewish state, and accepting a Palestinian state without weapons and with partial sovereignty. Meanwhile, Arab countries are being forced to normalize their relations with Israel. Israel is enforcing new realities on the ground in a way that will make the Palestinians lose any hope of establishing a viable state that has geographical continuity. Israel wants to keep the Palestinians in isolated areas that have partial sovereignty in the middle of a sea of settlements. Ilyas Karam, Al Jazeera, from the E1 area in eastern occupied Jerusalem.
Joining us is the bureau chief for Al Jazeera, Walid Al-Omari. Walid, do you think that the new settlement projects will affect political relations between Israelis and Palestinians or between Israel and the U.S.?
It
doesn't seem so, at least in terms of Israeli-U.S. relations. There are rumors in Israel that the new settlement projects were carried out in coordination with approval from the U.S. administration. Israel reached an understanding with the U.S. administration on continuing the construction of 2,500 units that are already under construction. This is the case in Abu Ghanim mountain. For example, it used to be empty of settlements and covered with green trees. Now Israel wants the U.S. to agree to the construction of 500 new settlement units. Some Israelis say that the U.S. has an understanding that these new units will encourage the Israeli government to reach a temporary suspension of settlement construction. In the past, we heard many opinions from the Palestinians saying that they would not return to the negotiation table as long as the construction of settlements continued. Yet every time they resumed negotiations, the construction of settlements did not stop. This has been the situation since the Madrid Peace Conference in the beginning of the 1990s. Israel wants to promote the idea of building these settlements as necessary in order to reach a temporary suspension on future settlements. Israel wants the world to accept it and expects the U.S. to support it, and perhaps expects Arab countries and the Palestinians to remain silent. As Henry Kissinger said in his memorandum, Israel does not have a foreign policy, but an internal policy that it tries to sell to the world.
Palestinians in Nahr al-Barid refugee camp are living in a real tragedy. 2 years after the battles have ended, more than half of them are still displaced. They get nothing from the holy month's generous benefits. Our colleague, Christine Habib, has the following report.
The course of this river is the only thing that hasn't changed. Everything on both of its banks has changed. Buildings that used to stand tall have been reduced to skeletons. Flowers on balconies are buried in the dust of war. Some displaced refugees are guarding the ruins of their homes, while others are sneaking a peek from behind the fence at what's left of the old refugee camp. Nahr al-Barid has two parts. The new part is still under construction, and the old part is not being rebuilt due to many problems. The most significant problem arose when numerous historical discoveries, including an ancient castle, were demolished by an order from the parliament, which was followed by an order from the National Shura Council to stop construction in the old camp. Here, the Muhajirin neighborhood has seen the most intense conflict. And this was the Houthis area, which was the focus of a surveillance camera during the war days, that used to be the house of Shakil Absi. 2 years ago, this refugee camp only had Fatah al-Islam terrorists and soldiers from the Lebanese army. The refugees were displaced and were forced to live without enough food or a dignified life. 2 years later, life is returning to the Nahr al-Barid refugee camp, but its people are forced to eat cold and humble Ramadan dinners. What a great difference between their meals and the luxurious and sizzling dinners of the homes of richer families.
I'm cooking some eggplants with green peppers.
Is this a Palestinian dish?
Yes.
Eggplant is a fashionable food in the refugee camp because meat is extremely expensive. The narrow space does not allow for too much preparation of food.
Sometimes we don't have money to buy meat. What can we do? Whatever there is, we eat. We prepare whatever we have, such as frying potatoes and so on.
Are you satisfied with your meal?
Thank God, it's a blessing.
What did you eat?
Rice and lentils, thank God.
Women spread out on the floor to prepare the fattoush salad for iftar, while insects crawl between the cooking utensils. This is life in the mobile homes of the Nahr al-Barid refugee camp. This mobile home consists of a small wooden room. Under its tin roof, food and beds are mixed with other daily supplies. People who live here suffer from scorching heat in the summer and floods in the winter.
Imagine, this place is supposed to fit 11 people. It includes the bedroom, kitchen, and living room. We need a place to wash dishes, do laundry, and bathe the kids. They force us to live like dogs, and nobody cares about what happens to us.
God either takes care of us, or the Palestinian Authority will. Of course, God will take charge of the Palestinian leadership, because we are a steadfast people. Thousands of us have been killed or injured. The people are fighting and staying strong. They do not deserve to live in these humiliating conditions. This is a sin, and the Palestinian leadership should not have let it happen. This boy will one day become a man, and he needs a house. The Palestinian leaders live in palaces and villas, and they have companies in France and Europe and other places. But when it comes to this boy in this refugee camp, nobody cares. The Palestinian leadership must understand that they are the sons of refugees too, just like this boy.
Palestinians suffer from one displacement after another. The Nahr al-Barid refugee camp is being transformed into a camp of mobile homes. Despite this tragic reality, Palestinians have gotten accustomed to the life here. They prepare festival sweets for the holidays amidst these tragedies, and the kids are playing in the rubble of war. Even the charred black walls are used as background to illuminate the holiday lights. From Nahr al-Barid refugee camp, Christine Habib, New TV. Nutritionists believe that the month of Ramadan provides people who fast with an opportunity to get rid of some unhealthy habits, such as smoking and drinking caffeinated beverages like tea and coffee.
This segment is brought to you by the Abu Dhabi Health Department.
Some people who fast endure more than others during Ramadan while trying to abstain from smoking and drinking caffeinated beverages. The question is, does Ramadan affect people's addictions?
I'm the kind of person who drinks a lot of coffee.
Right after I break my fast, I smoke a cigarette. I smoke even before I pray.
I drink tea right after I break my fast, and I drink coffee until late night.
No, I smoke during Ramadan.
I drink cups of coffee and 6 cups of tea a day.
I drink 2 cups of coffee at night and another 2 in the morning just before I start my fast.
People who are addicted to smoking, hookahs, and coffee tend to show withdrawal signs if they suddenly halt their intake of whatever it is they are addicted to. The withdrawal signs include headache, tension, and depression.
ورغم ذلك فالكثيرون من الخبراء يرجحون إمكانية الإفادة.
However, many experts believe that people who fast use the holy month of Ramadan to overcome unhealthy addictions. Nutritionists say that caffeinated beverages remain in the bloodstream for 7 hours after being consumed.
مؤثراتها تبقى في الدم بعد شربها 7 ساعات. وحتى بعد مرور 14
25% of caffeine remains in the blood for up to 14 hours after being consumed. This explains why people who fast have the urge to drink the highest amount of caffeine at the end of the day.
كانت نصيحة الخبراء إلى مدمني القهوة والشاي بتناولها على السحور.
Nutritionists advise coffee and tea drinkers to drink these beverages during the suhoor, which is the last meal before they start their fast. They also recommend that coffee and tea drinkers decrease caffeine consumption starting a few weeks before Ramadan. This helps people that fast to gradually adjust to the decrease in caffeine consumption during Ramadan. Nutritionists also warn that soft drinks have as much caffeine as coffee or tea, although many people do not realize this. They recommend no more than 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day. They also advise people that fast to avoid smoking because cigarettes contain carcinogenic substances like polonium. Other substances are officially categorized as poisonous, such as carbon dioxide and acetone. When people inhale smoke, nicotine is transmitted into their blood and transferred to the brain in seconds. The nicotine causes chemical changes in the brain that are often associated with the urge to smoke more cigarettes. In addition to the nicotine, each cigarette contains huge quantities of poisonous substances.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.